First of all, when Kara called me, I initially said no because like you and like a lot of other people, you don't like to talk about yourself. And to talk for 30 minutes or something like that, that's really bad. But anyhow, I called her back and told her it'd be okay. She said there was 3 or 4 people that asked for me, so I said okay. First thing is my wife Betty's here, and we celebrate our 60th wedding anniversary next month. We happen to have the same birthday date, and so I have a tendency to remember birthdays okay, but our anniversaries, they kind of slip by a little bit once in a while. When I first met Betty, she was a widow. Her husband had been in the Air Force. He flew B-17s and B-29s, and they were in Tucson, Arizona. And he got something, there's a big long name for it, but basically it's called a valley fever, where they get fungus in your lungs, and he did not survive. She had a little boy that was 4 years old at the time. But later on, I'll talk about when we got married. But we had a boy, a young son, my gosh, yeah, about a year later, and he had passed away when he was 47, 12 years ago last month. But anyhow, got 3 grandchildren, 2 girls and a boy, and we have 3 great-granddaughters, 6, 2, and 1. We moved to Midland in 1977, and Janice, here's where I told you I was going to get you in trouble. We joined the church after we met with Janice. She lived 2 doors from us, and she came here, so we thought it'd be a good try, and we're still here. Talk a little bit about just my parents and get them up to date. They were about 3rd or 4th generation Germans, and they got married in Iowa, and Mom had some nursing training. I don't know where she got that. My dad only spoke German until he went to school, and then he only went through the 8th grade as far as he went. My brother and I were both born on a farm in Minnesota. In about 1935 or 36, because of the depression that was going on at the time, they moved to Oregon. And why Oregon? I don't know. They never said why. But he had 3 brothers, and they all lived on the farm with their family, and the farm could not support 5 different families. So my dad's dad said, 3 of you guys got to go out, get out of town someplace. But anyhow, they decided to go out to Oregon, and as I said, I don't know why, and he started working out there in a sawmill where they cut logs into lumber, just a little itty-bitty town. And at that time, we lived in a garage, a 1-car garage, that again, at the height of the Depression. And about 1940-something, my dad took me over and showed me that. The garage was still there. Nothing else was around it, but the garage was still there. We moved to Longview, Washington, which is north of Portland, and he went to work for a Longville Lumber Company. And they either leased the land for him or gave him the land to a tract phone to build a house, or he had them build it, or somebody built a house. And we built a house that was called a tar paper shack. I guess anybody know what those are? Okay. And we lived in it for a couple, 2, 3 years. We had 3 small rooms, just electricity. No running water. Was a pump that Dad dug a well out back, and of course we had an outside john. And I'm remembering this because I was only 3, 4, 5, I guess, about 5 by that time. And they had our refrigerator was I don't know if you ever seen a orange crate, about soap lines divided. It's got a center sign. It's got a wooden thing, and he put it outside the kitchen window on a platform, and put some cloth around or something, and then wet down to kind of keep it cool. And that's where we kept our milk and butter and everything else, because we didn't have anything else. We stayed there, until about 1939, and then we moved to another in the same town, just out in the country. This is all out in the country, and it had an indoor john, and had siding, and it was really something different. But we had a cow and some chickens, and I remember Mom using a separator to separate the cream from the milk and stuff, and then she'd take the cream and put some of it in a 2-quart jar and had us shake it to make butter. And I don't know if anybody ever done that, but that's different. 1942 to 46, World War II was going on, and we moved to Portland, Oregon. My mom and dad worked in a shipyard, both of them. Not all the time. My dad worked there all the time. My mom worked part-time in a, had to have, what were they? I can't remember what it was. Anyhow, so after the war was over, we moved down to Albany, Oregon, which is about 70 miles south of Portland. And then Mom and Dad lived there the rest of their lives. Dad opened a cabinet shop and kept that for 4 years. And in 1950, when I graduated from high school, he started building houses, which I helped him with, until 52. And when I went into service, he changed to a construction company, and my younger brother started helping him out in a construction company, and eventually took over the construction company. And then when he retired, his son took over, so his son still has it. My mom spent the last 8 years of her life, and she had Alzheimer's and in a nursing home, and so she outlived my dad by about 2 years. One thing that I don't know really why, but my parents never went to church that I know of. I don't ever remember them talking about it or going. I envy Steve talking about his grandparents and how he gets guidance from them, or one of his younger and stuff. My mother's mother died when she was 6, so I never got a chance to meet her. My 2 grandfathers, I met once each, one time, and that was it. My mother's mother, she came and stayed with us 3-4 times in my life, but she was a real nice young lady. Now I'll get into my story, so leave my parents out of this. But through the care of this, through the grace of God, I would not be here tonight. I'm going to give you about 3 specific instances and about 2 or 3 other close calls that I had. Because I've survived all of these things, I guess it's my opinion that God has got more things for me to do. So give her a whirl. I was born on a farm, in that farm in Minnesota that they were from, and 2 weeks later I had double pneumonia. And the doctor had kind of given up on me because he came out to see us 2-3 days later, or see my mother. That's what my mother told me. And he was all filled out, ready to fill out my death certificates. So, but they had an old German recipe that my parents smothered me in onions for 2 days or 3 days, and it took the pneumonia away. So that was pretty interesting. My very, very first job is after we moved into that other house there that I worked for I was 8 years old, and I worked 12 days. I made $1 a day, and we worked from 2 a.m. to 12 noon because it was so hot. And I was poking wires on a baler. The old baling machine, they'd put out and put over the field and bring all the hay in and feed it into the baler. And every so often they had to put this piece of wood in that had slots in it for the wire, and I'd work on that. So that's what I did for 12 days. I used my $12 and bought a $10 bicycle, so that worked out pretty good. My brother was very happy because the other bicycle we had, so he had full control on that one. And when we moved to Portland, we had different paper routes, but one time we had 5 paper routes, just my brother and I. And we I also became a branch manager for this paper there, and I had to parcel out the papers that they sent to the paper boys that were going to take them around and deliver them around town. And when I was 13 years old, I got my Social Security card. I paid 10 cents a paycheck, or not even a paycheck, whenever they paid me. I don't remember how they paid me, but I paid 10 cents went into Social Security when I was 13. 1946, after the war, we moved down to Albany, like I said before, and I had a paper route for a while, but I spent a lot of time working at various different little farms out there, picking cherries, picking beans, driving tractor, plowing, driving a combine, sewing sacks on a combine like we used to. And it worked for a guy one time that driving tractor and sewing sacks. That he was a farmer, but he wore a clean white shirt every day. And I don't know how he did that, but that's what he did. Let's see, well, I also helped my dad build houses. He wanted to make me a finished carpenter because I do all the interior work on a house, and that never went by the wayside because I joined the Air Force. Something we never did do is discuss going to college. I don't know whether he could afford it or they could afford it or what, but anyhow, I did not go. And Korean War was kicked off, and of course there I was, 19 years old, and I'd been ripe for going in the Army, but I joined the Air Force instead. So I enlisted, when I was 19, and spent 2 months at Lackland down in San Antonio, and then I went to Belleville, Illinois, and went to a radio mechanics school. Now this radio mechanics school, there was no transistors, everything was vacuum tube. And then you all remember vacuum tubes, having to go anyhow, when I was there, I heard there was a chance to get into aviation cadets to be a pilot. So I went to them, and first thing I had to do was take a 2-year college equivalency test, which I took and passed. And the physical was extremely tough. And just give you, for instance, 40 of us walked into the eye clinic to have our eyes checked. 20 of us walked out on the other side. The other 20 didn't make it. They had coordination checks to see if you touch your nose and all sorts of things if you're upside down or whatever. Then they had a little officers board, but so I qualified for that, and then they said, well, we'll call you when we get a class. In March of '53, well, first of all, I went to San Francisco for 5 months and worked on B-29s and B-17s, and got my cadet class came through, and so in March of '53, I started cadet class training. 3 months in San Antonio for officers training. Then could we have the first picture, please? 3 months, and then 6 months, I was in Marianna, Florida, and flying Piper Cubs and T-6s. This is a bunch of T-6s just lying on the road, but they're pretty good sized airplane for somebody. I got 20 hours in the Piper Cub, and I got about 120 hours in those things in 6 months. Something I did, I don't know, you all know what an iron lung is? Anybody ever seen one? See it work? Well, there was a storm came through Marianna, a hurricane, and it knocked all the power to Marianna, Florida, including the hospital. They did not have generators or anything. So they called out to the base, and 10 of us went down and hand pumped an iron lung. See, we did it for about a day and a half, I guess it was. And they finally got some power into the hospital, and so this little girl was 14 years old, had polio, and she could not breathe. About 2 weeks later, something like that, they decided to move her from Marianna, Florida to Tallahassee, where they had better care, and so they brought her down in a flatbed truck out of the hospital there, and then we put her into a boxcar on a train, and we hand pumped this iron lung all the way over to Tallahassee, and then they put her on another truck over there, a flatbed truck, and then they took us to a Florida State football game, which was pretty nice. We did that good. Then we jumped on a bus and went back to Marianna, where we were going through training. I got 2 instances of close calls, I guess you would call them. I got the chills one night and shakes, and I could not get warm. I borrowed everybody's blanket I could get, and I was stacked about that deep in blankets, and I was just sitting there shaking, and my temperature went bananas, I guess. I never took it. But about 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night, I started to sweat, and I guess broke part of the fever and stuff. So next morning when I woke up, I didn't sleep very good, but next morning when I woke up, I really had a sore throat. So I went over to the dispensary. They took my temperature and it was over 104 then. They started pumping me full of penicillin, and I finally got my temperature back down to normal in 4 days, and I'm allergic to penicillin to this day. Let's see, I think that's about it. Then after that, we went to, I got one more thing here. What is it? Forgot. The iron lung. Anyhow, went to Greenville, Mississippi, and could I have the next slide, please? And this is a T-28. This in particular airplane has got a bunch of bomb racks on. Ours didn't have it. And this got a bigger engine than the one that we did, but it basically looks just like that. And we used that for training. We got about 40 hours in that thing, instrument-wise and everything else. One little close chance that came to me when I was flying that thing, we were flying formation, and there's 3 of us, and they had the lead, and if you'll take your hand and put your fingers like this, you can see that the longer finger is the lead. I was on the left wing, and this other guy was on the right wing. Well, we used to use little dips of the wing to tell us to move without telling us on the radio to move over to the other side. And he dipped it to the right, so I was supposed to go over to the left-hand side. And what the guy on the right-hand side was supposed to have done was slide out and back a little bit so I could fall in there. Well, I started eating back in the power a little bit, and I started to turn. I looked over, and here he was like this. He was only over about 50 feet and coming at me like this. So I just jammed a stick forward, and he went right over the top of me. Anyhow, in July of '54, I graduated, and they pinned the wings on me and made me a second lieutenant. And I was a distinguished grad. They picked 5 people out of 70. And basically it turned out we got to have our choice of assignments. They got a whole bunch of assignments in, and we got our choice. And I went to Panama City, Florida to fly the F-86 all-weather interceptor. Could I have the next slide, please, Thor? This is actually taken in Japan. That's Mount Fuji behind it, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But that's what it looks like. You could go from, it had an afterburner on it, and you go from brake release to 40,000 feet. It took about 8-9 minutes. You could... which took forever. It burned up a heck of a lot of gas that thing didn't have, so we didn't do it very often. In Japan, I flew 86s, I say, for 2 years, from 1955 through 1956. And I had 2 close calls over there. One is that I got a new guy in the squadron. He was a captain, had a lot of flying time, but he had never flown an interceptor that's got radar on it. So I took him through the simulator and showed him how the radar worked and everything. And to take him out to fly, they gave us a choice of 2 airplanes. And I'd flown both airplanes quite a few times. And so I said, take this airplane over here because it's got a better radar and it's easier to work than the one that I was going to fly. So he did, and I took off, and he was supposed to fly 5 miles in trail. So he took off right behind me. And he says, I heard him on the radio. He said, Bob, I got a problem. And then nothing. And so I went back. And he had crashed off the end of the runway, killed himself. The other one was, I was chasing, we had an exercise going, and I was at 42 or 43,000 feet, about 100 miles south of Tokyo, and I got an aft engine fire warning light. They had 2 fire warning lights on an airplane. One's red, and that's, you don't stay with the airplane, then you just bail out because that's all around, there's fuel all around where that thing is. But the yellow one was just the aft end had a fire. So I did not want to bail out south of Japan because they had quite a few people, not a wrong term, they had several Navy people that bailed out, got in rafts, but they never found them again. And so I just put it over and put it straight down and blew out the fire at about 25, 30,000 feet. And then I flew it back up to where our base was and landed, and the whole back end of the airplane was all black, but it good. I didn't want to bail out, that's for sure. I left Japan in December of '56, and in January of '57, I was through '59. I was assigned to Hanscom Field up in Boston, just outside of Boston, between Lexington and Concord. Flew both the F-86, this one, and the T-33. I'll show you a picture of them in a little bit. Met my beautiful wife. Got married, and we had our son that I told you about, had already passed away. We stayed there until '59 when they closed down the squadron, and then moved down to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, from 1960 to '64, and flew the F-101 and T-33. Could I have the next slide, please? It's a big airplane, weighs 35,000 pounds. It has 2 engines in it with afterburner, and each engine puts out 10,000 pounds of thrust plus 5,000 when the afterburner is going. So there's 30,000 pounds of thrust for a 35,000 pound airplane, so it's almost 1-to-1. It was such a strong airplane that before you take off, you run your engines up to check them out. You had to do it individually because if you couldn't put them both up there, so put them up about 85% of power. And if you put any more power on it, the brakes would hold, but the tires would rotate on the drum, and so you couldn't go. And you could go for brake release to 40,000 feet, and that thing in 2 minutes. So that's 59 years ago. So you can imagine what they do now. It could go 1.7 Mach or 1.7 times the speed of sound. And they eventually put an infrared search track system in where you could pick up tailpipes of other airplanes, a heat source, and pick it up, and then your radar would slave to it, so you'd get an automatic fire if you had to ever do that. In summer of '64, moved to Panama City, Florida, and I went as an instructor in the Air Force Interceptor Weapons School. And now we have my third major instance happening. First of all, my boss wanted to go up to the upper part of the United States, Michigan, Wisconsin, all up in here where the fighter squadrons were, because the school we taught down there was how to the guys so they could do a better job of finding enemy airplanes if they ever did come through. We went up there and went to about 5 or 6 different bases, and then we left Oscoda, Michigan, and it's still daylight, about 4 o'clock or something like 5 o'clock. And we got airborne and lost our radio, vacuum tubes again. So we had to go back and land. And when you don't have a radio and you're going to try to go in and land, you go down the runway like this, and the tower gives you a green light, so it lets you know that you can land or what to do. So we landed, refueled, got a new radio, and took off again. It was starting to get dark, and we were heading down. Could I have the T-33 picture, please? Next one. This is what the airplane looks like when we were in it. That's not the one, but one looks like that. We just got past Wright-Patterson, which is in Dayton, Ohio, and we were at 38,000 feet and had a complete instantaneous electrical failure. Just like you touched 2 hot wires together and a big flash, and nothing worked after that. The engine ran, but nothing else worked. Anything electrical didn't work. Circuit breakers were all popped. I tried pushing them back in to get something going again, and nothing worked. And I had to put a flashlight in my left hand to keep it on the airspeed indicator, see how fast we were going. I couldn't go in the clouds because you need pitot heat, and that takes electricity, and I couldn't do that. And also my instruments, I didn't have any instruments for flying in weather. So we flew a little bit south of there, and then we saw a hole in the overcast, and I went down. I could see some lights, so I knew I could get down underneath it. Got down underneath it and started looking around. I don't know what for, but there was only about 1,000 feet, and I really didn't want to try to do an ejection at 1,000 feet because getting out of that seat and getting your parachute open in 1,000 feet is not very much. So, and I couldn't get in the weather, so I didn't really know what we were going to do after that. But we saw a rotating beacon, and a rotating beacon is a green light and a white light. Got one out here at the airport. Sometimes you ever look, and that meant it was a civilian airport. So I flew down it about 400 or 500 feet above the runway, and the accident board asked me later on how long I thought that runway was, and I said probably between 3,000 and 4,000 feet, just short of 4, and he said it was 4,200 feet long. So that was a pretty good guess. So I could hardly hear the guy in the back seat, so I couldn't trust him to. That's the wrong term. They'd keep the power on, and I don't know whether he had a flashlight or not. He didn't tell me, but to keep it on the airspeed indicator. And so we went out, and I put the gear handle down. I don't know if the gear ever went down or not, but no flaps, no trim, no nothing, except that a light on the airspeed indicator. And got on final for this airport, and I'd only practiced, well, I practiced it a few times, of landing without flaps. And instead of being a steep ascent like this normal, you're real flat. And but I could see the runway, and I didn't know it, but it had a bad slope uphill like this. And I was a lot lower. I was probably about 100 feet lower than I should have been if I could have seen it, because it was dark. I couldn't see anything. You want to give this next picture, please? This is what's left of the cockpit. You can see the back seat ceased to exist. You can see where the nose broke off in front of my feet. You can see the windshield there. And the ejection seat that I was sitting in, if it hadn't moved up the track a little bit, which would blow my lap belt, which let me be free game bouncing around in there, I'd been missing from, as you can see the cockpit, I'd been missing from about here up. And it was kind of like when I woke up, I was lying about 5-6 feet from where this cockpit is here, and the tail section, and you got one of those pictures of the tail section? It was sitting about 5-6 feet from me here too. You can put it back on the other one if you want, please. And it's kind of like you're in a bad dream. You don't know how you got there, and nobody was helping me. There was a road about 700 feet away that people came down and turned past the airport, and the headlights will go across the wreckage of the airplane, and nobody helps you, and you don't understand why. I don't think I really realized I was in a crash. It was just all of a sudden I'm someplace, and I said, well, I got to crawl over that road because nobody's helping me. So I guess I could walk a little bit too, but not very much. I crawled, and I'd wake up with my face in the dirt, and I finally worked my way over there, and I was sitting in a bar ditch and trying to wave with one hand. Nobody stopped and picked me up. Nobody. So I moved into the bar ditch a little bit, and so I could move both hands. Still nobody had stopped. I had an orange flight suit on. I had a scarf over my head, and I had a wool stocking cap in my pocket, but I never put it on. I didn't even realize I had it. And people go by me in their cars, go by, and pretty soon some car came back the other way. And he pulled up, put his headlights on me, and he went by me earlier and thought I was a drunk. That's the reason he didn't stop the first time. But apparently, God had gave him a sign, something that he's not a drunk. So he came over, and I crawled over his car, and I got in, and then I really started to hurt because I started to thaw out. The temperature was 18 degrees, and I'd been out there 3.5 hours already. You know what, when you look at this wreckage, you want to show them some of the other pictures of the wreckage, please? Get a little broader view. I don't know, can you see that very well? We hit where the dike is, you can see, hit there, ricocheted. The accident board told me this later. Hit there, ricocheted, hit the ground, tore off that wing, and broke the nose off in front of my feet, and then rolled up in the whole tail section. It came to a grinding halt. And it's about 700 feet up to that road, as I said. You know, try a couple of those other ones too, just to show you what's left. There's just nothing left. One more, and you can back the original one now if you want. Anyhow, this man, he helped me, he took me to the hospital, and I must have been moaning and groaning pretty good because I didn't have any blood on me for some reason. I just, later on I'll explain what I had, but I must have been moaning and groaning because we saw a policeman coming the other way, and he pulled over in front of him and stopped. And then he took us to the hospital with the light going, so we got there a little faster. Got to the hospital. This is two interesting things coming up. The corpsman there rolled up a stretcher, you know, on wheels and stuff. Everybody's seen those. And they would not help me out of the car and onto the stretcher. And so this guy picked me up, helped me, and I got out of the car and put my body up on top, and I must have passed out again. Because the next thing I know, here he is again. He said the nuns went on and dressed you, so they were nurses, went on and dressed me so that so the doctor could examine me. So he helped me get my jacket off, and my boot hurt like holy heck. Something was wrong with my ankle, and anyhow, I must have passed out again because I woke up again. I was lying in bed. It was still dark. And there was a Catholic priest at the foot of the bed, and he saw I was awake, and he said, "Do you mind if I pray over you, son?" I said, "Have at her, Father." I passed out again. And so I woke up again, and then there was an Air Force doctor there. He had a blue uniform on, so I knew, and he told me his name. And then, and only then, did I remember the other man with me. He said I'd have never found him anyway. It was dark, and he was laying on the other side of the wreckage to me, and he had any one of 6 fatal injuries. And I asked for the first one. I asked for one, and he says, well, primarily his spine was driven through his brain. And I said, I don't want to know anymore. That's enough. Ralph went home after he got me there, and he had a bad heart, so he was back there in about 2 hours. He was having some problems with his heart. So I didn't see him then, but they took me up to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base up at Dayton, Ohio. And he came about 3 or 4 days later. Him and his wife came up to see me there. And Betty had got there. She got there. She left the night after the accident. The next morning she left, flew into Atlanta, and the weather was so bad they didn't think they were going to be able to get her into Dayton. And the hospital there, they had somebody go down to the airport and pick up Betty and take her up to the hospital. So anyhow, Ralph did that. I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit, but about 6 months later, the Air Force gave him the Meritorious Achievement Award, which is one of the highest awards they can give a civilian. About a year later, he came down to Panama City, Florida, where I was still living, and I got him a ride in an F-102 fighter, 2-seated. Ralph got a heart a couple, 2, 3 years later than that, but it didn't last very long, and he didn't live very much longer after that. But anyhow, we got up to the hospital up at Wright-Pat, and first thing they started to do was taking x-rays. And they take x-ray. Of course, I couldn't go to the x-ray tables and do it, so they did it in bed. And laying on one of those boards like that, that's uncomfortable. You think the other one's hard. You ought to try sitting on one of those. But anyhow, they x-rayed the heck out of me, and I ended up with a broken back, cracked all these ribs across here, punctured my right lung, caved my head in, and didn't break an ankle, but I sure sprained the heck out of it. When Betty got there, I didn't have any whites in my eyes. They were all red from broken blood vessels. And they fitted me with a back brace after about 3-4 days. And then it took me a couple of days to learn how to walk again by using the high rails. You've seen when people learn how to walk again. Took me that, and then the wing commander from Tyndall came up there to see me, and he said, if you need anything, Bob, let me know. So they said I could go home after about, I think it was about 2 weeks, wasn't it, Mommy? I think about 2 weeks. And so I got ready to go, and they had these Nightingale flights, which was go around the different Air Force bases, but you had to ride where they were going. They wouldn't take you to A, to where I needed to go to B. They didn't want to Z, D, and all over the place. But yeah, it was going to take them 5 days to get me home, and I called the wing commander, and he said, baloney, we'll have an airplane up there for you tomorrow. He said, tell Betty to get on it too. So we went back to Tyndall and Panama City, and the ironic thing is I weaned myself with a back brace in about 2-3 months. I guess I got rid of it. And I went back out. I was an avid golfer, and I started. First of all, I couldn't play golf, couldn't swing, but I go out the golf course, and I'd walk maybe 100 yards, and I couldn't go any further. Sit down and rest for a while until I get enough strength, and come back and go home, and come back the next day, and I get 100 more. Kept doing that, and finally I get so I can make it around. So I took a 7-iron and stopped chipping a little bit, putting. Eventually in July, I had weaned myself with a back brace, and I played 4 rounds of golf, and I was only 2 over par. I got deadly angry. People wouldn't play with me yet. Then I developed a 102-degree temperature, and they couldn't figure out why. And they couldn't really x-ray me again. They had to be judicious in that because I'd been x-rayed so many times, and my body wouldn't take much more. Anyhow, they did, and turns out my right lung cavity was full of blood. And the only way they get it out was to operate on, cut me wide open and take the blood out, or do something like what they call a thoracentesis. And that's where they go in through your skin, past your ribs with a needle and poke it through. And of course, every time they poked it through, they hit my lung. So I jumped about a foot. They pull it back and put a bigger needle, bigger needle, bigger needle. And finally, they pull it in and put it back so it just was barely inside your skin. And I had to breathe to force the fluid out. Anyhow, they did this 5 different times. And the third one, I think Betty was there, and I must have been crying like a baby. She said, why don't you give him something? So the next one, they gave me morphine. And I felt like my head was about 6 feet off my shoulders. It hurt like hell, but I just didn't give a darn. Just no way. I said, don't give me any more of that stuff, because you do again, I'll throw up all over the place. So they did it one more time, and then they got it down where they thought my body could take care of it. And they eventually took 2.5 quarts of fluid out of my right lung cavity. I started spending most of my time trying to get back on flying status. And I had to, first of all, convince the doctors that I was only unconscious for about an hour. It could have been 2 hours, or it could have been 10 minutes. I don't know. I really don't know. But however long, I convinced it to take me to crawl over that old country road and this type of thing. So they decided to send me to the Air Force Medical Center in San Antonio. Is where like the astronaut physical. Physical took a week and a half. But the things in there that really was concerned about was my head. It was kind of egg-shaped when Betty got there, but it kind of come back to normal. And my white eyes, I could see fine, but it was just blood red from my eyes. anyhow, so they did the thing we call an EEG, electronic encephalograph. We watch your brainwave patterns run around. They stick little needles in your head, and they make you. First of all, you have to stay up all night the night before, so you're dead tired, and they start asking you questions and think about doing this. Now move your hand, or think about moving your hand, or just different things to watch your brainwave patterns run around. And so they got done, and he said, Bob, you got an abnormality in your brainwave pattern. You possibly could have an epileptic seizure. So we're not going to recommend you go back on flying status. So I came back again 6 months later, did the same thing, same result. And by then, I got called up to go to Vietnam. And so the last thing they had to do is go get, when you're over there 6 months from now, go get another EEG done. I said, okay. So I went out to Japan, Vietnam, and of course not flying, was medically grounded. So they stuck me in a job that I had no background in at all. My boss, his boss, was directly underneath the ambassador. I didn't work for the Air Force at all. And what we did was, it's called Joint United States Public Affairs Office. And what we did, we had 8 different programs trying to get the Vietnamese people to support their own people. This was all of 1968. I got over there the day before Tet started, and you all remember Tet. And anyhow, I was over there doing that, and we had a maid that was assigned to the embassy housing where this other guy and I were staying. We had a 2-bedroom apartment, and had a Vietnamese woman who had 2 kids who were sired by a French army sergeant. A little boy was 13 and his sister was 11. And so we paid Mama enough money extra so she could send the kids to school with the proviso that they take English. Well, the big thing then was we had a curfew and you couldn't go anywhere anyway, so at night I gave English lessons to the boy first, naturally, because of the Oriental. So I did that, and they actually got speaking so they could speak pretty good English out of it. And Mama did anything we wanted Mama to do, we'd ask the kids to go tell her. 6-month time came up for going up to get the check, and went off to the flight surgeon out at the Tan Son Nhut Air Base, and he said each check. So he checked the one in Cameron Bay, and nobody was there to run that one. It takes a neurologist to check it. Then nobody worked on Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. So he said, "Can you go to Japan?" And I said, "Well, I'll go ask my boss." So they got me based, and I went up there to Japan to Tachikawa. And again, you got to stay up all night. And he checked me out, and then he said, "Bob," he said, "I can't see anything different. You still got an abnormality in your brainwave pattern." And I said, "Is there anything that you can give me to see if I will have a seizure?" And he said, "Well, if you have one, that's it. We won't." And I said, "Okay, and I'll stop fighting you." So again, up all night again the next night, and then next morning put you in like a lazy boy chair, and put a big photoelectric cell like this flashing at different intervals, and you can't take the shot that they give me straight into your hand, so they put it in an IV and start pumping this stuff in me. And he got up to 5 milligrams, I think, Lacfor, but I'm not sure on the term, but I was dizzy and slung. I was slurring my words, thick tongue. And he said, "Do you think you can take any more?" And I said, "I think I can take a little more." So he put a little bit more in me. Ooh, and first thing it sounded like a train was coming at me, full bore, and went right through my head and went out the other side. And not only that, the chair I was sitting in was spinning this way and this way at the same time. And I said, "Oh boy." Of course, it's the lights flashing, and I blinked my eyes, and I caught the edge of a door frame, so I knew which way was up. So he asked me some more questions, and he gave me a shot and just cleared it up just almost instantaneously. And after he got all done, he said, "Bob, 98% of the people in the world will have an epileptic seizure before you do." I said, You put that in writing? He said, darn right. So I went back to Vietnam, and I got back there about 3 months ago, and I passed a kidney stone when I was there. And I was in the Third Field Hospital, and I didn't know what it was. It just hurt like heck, and they took me over there, and they were going to go take some x-rays to see what it was, and reeled me up there in a wheelchair, and big sharp pain, and it was gone. Whatever it was there. And they determined it had blood in my urine that I had passed a seed. So they kept me for a couple of days, and they had me in this ward, and there's one other bed, and there's 3 or 4 other beds in there, but there's a little Vietnamese girl in there in the other bed, and she'd been there a year. They did 5 operations on her back to straighten out her spine, and she'd already had 5 of them done, but she'd come over and talk to you, just talk GI English or GI language, no swear words, just yada, yada, yada. And they made her take a nap, and she asked if she could sleep. In my bed. And I said, yes. And she said, make sure she takes her nap. I said, okay. So I saw her, she did it the next day, and then I left, and I went back to work, and then I got notification that the flight surgeon wanted to see me, got all the paperwork, but I had to come out and sign something. So Third Field Hospital was right across the road from the Tonson Newt Air Base, so I went out there, and I said, well, I'll go see my little girl. And I was walking down they have covered walkways, got a lot of rain over there. And I was walking down there, and she was talking to the little Vietnamese boys, and she saw me, and she ran down there and jumped up and gave me a kiss on the cheek and says, you didn't shave this morning. I said, yes, I did. But anyhow, I came back to see her again a couple of weeks later, and they had sent her back to the orphanage that they'd got her out of it. But she was quite a little girl. After that, I had 3 more months to go, and then I got stationed into Fort Walton Beach in Florida, and that's up in the Panhandle, and in a special operations school. And about 3 months later, I got back on flying status, and I flew for about 3 more years when I was in the school, and finally, because I got promoted to lieutenant colonel, and they said that because I was just a reserve officer, not a regular officer, that they were going to have to take me and stop me from flying, but they'd pay me for it, but not let me fly. Anyhow, I did get back on flying status, and that was a lot of fun. I had a full colonel that I used to fly around. He had to go different places because of the school, and he'd see some friends of his, and they'd ask him, he says, I didn't know you flew these T-33s, and he says, I'd take a CNI major along with me to take care of me, so that's what I did. I retired from the Air Force in May of '73. I flew corporate aviation for 22 years. I flew 4 years, no, a little longer, 26 years. 4 years in Atlanta, and I came out here and flew for Tipperary Corporation for 1.5 years, El Paso Products for 6 months, and I flew for Wagner and Brown for 20 years. I retired again when I was 67, and I got about 14,000 hours of flying time, 1,000 of which were in prop-type airplanes. All that flying time, I only had to shut an engine down. Well, one of them, I didn't shut it down. It shut itself down 3 times. And one was a twin prop airplane, and the oil pressure started dropping, so I had to keep a little oil pressure so I can feather the prop, and landed at Austin, and they fixed the airplane up in a couple of days, and I flew back home. Another one was our Lear started showing a drop in oil pressure, and so I landed at, we were just over by Dallas, so we landed at Dallas and got that fixed. It was just a pressure gauge. And the third one was, I was taking off an afterburner down in Florida, I just put the gear and the flaps up and had a right engine imploded and had flame go out, a better than 100 feet in front of me and also out the back end. I don't know what it was, but of course I got fire warning lights on that side, and the temperature was 1,000 degrees, just pegged at 1,000 degrees. I pulled up on downwind and asked the tower if I was smoking at all, and he said no. So I said, okay, come on, landed, and when he shut the engine down, or that engine already shut down, but it's parked out and got you could almost see through from the front of the airplane to the back. After I got out, I replaced my right hip in 2000, my left hip in 2002, and both knees, so I'm a fully bionic man now. I don't know, Carol, we got time enough for a couple, I don't know, a little long, but these are some remembrances I had. Beautiful cloud formations, pink contrails that depend on where the sun. We were flying out of Cape Cod, and we were flying low altitude intercepts over New Hampshire, and got a call from our controller that was over Newburgh, New York, and said, hey, how much gas you guys got left? And I said, oh, an hour and a half. And he said, climb to 35,000 feet and head east. And he said, there's a bunch of ships around the Texas Tower that they had out there at the time. It had radars on it. And we were flying out there to look-see, and the RO in the back seat had the radar, and he said, Bob, there's a lot of ships out there. So we went out, and all of them had the hammer and sickle on. It was a Russian fishing fleet. So they wanted to know the name of the ship, so the mothership, the factory ship, had their name painted on the side, and like it. So it's K, upside down R, backwards 2, inverted 3. Because he said, what? And he said, write it, because that's what it looks like. Anyhow, I did that, and I flew, and when I was in Japan, I flew in two 40 F-86s all in one formation, 2 different times. And that's quite a thrill. Another thing is climbing in full afterburner. And as I said, you do it in 2 minutes. So if you come out of a cloud deck at, say, 25 or 30,000 feet, you're 45 degrees of pitch, and you are going. You're smoking uphill. And it's really, really corporate-wise flying. We were flying just east of Baton Rouge. It was dark on the ground, dark in the sky, but it was still pretty light up above. And I saw my first and only UFO. I could see this light coming at way up, way above me. As I said, I was at 41,000 feet, I think, and he was pushing 100,000. He was way up there so far, whatever it was. And I asked if the controller, are they painting anything up there? And they said no. And you just watch it go. And it was heading east to west. And it was kind of like we saw in the paper the other day where we had the lights down in Florida or something. I thought something about it. It was similar to that one, except it wasn't that big. And so I got to see that. Normally, if you've seen satellites go, they're going west to east. And you've seen them, but not going the other direction. This is kind of funny, but one night when I was flying for Tipper, we had to fly from Dallas to Teterboro, New Jersey 3 times in one night. And Tipper had to do their annual reports, and they had to be in New York City the next day. So we'd fly up there and come back, get some more, flying back up to Teterboro, come back. And the third flight, we were coming home, it was about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I said, we were going by Cincinnati, and said, my brother-in-law is down there sound asleep, and here I'm going to call him up and say hi, So I called him up, and he said, hello. And I said, hey, Dick. He said, hey, Bob. He says, where are you? And I said, I'm 8 miles south and 8 miles up. Do you know what time it is? He says. He said, you son of a dick. He said, you can't say that. We're on the radio. Anyhow, I called him the next night, and I said, you sound like you were, pardon the expression, pissed. And he says, well, I really was. He said, I couldn't go back to sleep. And I said, you were the second pissed off guy in Cincinnati. Well, who was the first one? Well, the operator gave me the wrong number the first time. I have been Mach 2 in another airplane. I've been above 60,000 feet and not much in a regular flight suit. I wasn't supposed to be up there, but you're supposed to wear a pressure suit when you're anything over 50,000 feet. And I just did it on a Zoom type thing. I have been, I use the expression, we've all been over the Grand Canyon, and some of you have been to the Grand Canyon, but I have been over the Grand Canyon. I have been in the Grand Canyon, but I have never been to the Grand Canyon. We flew down about 300 or 400 feet below the lip and was going down through the canyon one time. Not supposed to, perfectly illegal. And finally we saw a bunch of wires starting to cross, and I said, well, they got wires, we better get up out of here. So we pulled up out of it. But that's a little bit different. Next thing is that flying above 40,000 feet, maybe 45, something like that, if it's clear, it's dark, and the sun is way over the horizon, and it's clear, and you can see the curvature of the earth. I've been hit by lightning quite a few times. No big deal. Outside, one time we took off from Baton Rouge going to Houston, and we got hit by lightning and put a 6-inch hole in my radome, knocked both my gas caps off. But outside that, we were okay. We landed there in Houston, got some duct tape, put it over the 6-inch gap, and we flew up to Dallas and got a new radome, got some gas caps, and flew back home again. So now you can help me. I don't know what you guys want to call this, but I told this to Steve last time, Kara, but I saw God giving a visual message to a pilot who happened to be sitting next to me in another airplane. But we were at Fort Lauderdale in Florida, and we taxied out, and there were thunderstorms all over the place. There is in summertime anyway. But we'd turn out, and we get parked parallel to the runway and turn the radar on and look at, and it was just gobs of thunderstorms all over the place. So we weren't going to go anywhere. And this DC-9 Eastern came up beside us, and they hold about 120 passengers. And he pulled up doing the same thing we did. And he says, Tower, we're ready for takeoff. And the tower says, I highly recommend that you do not go. He says, I can't even see you. It's raining so hard, and he couldn't even see the tower. And he said, no, I think we're going to go. And he no more than said that, and this bolt of lightning come out and hit right in front of his airplane. I mean, it didn't miss it 20 feet. And he says, Tower, cancel that clearance. We're not going to go. So I don't know if you want to call it God giving him a message, but I think he's pretty sure he did, and probably saved a bunch of people's lives. I got kind of bored with after I got all my stuff done and stuff, so I went and checked with Jan Reed, who used to be assistant minister here, and she got me with Carol Stroman, and who was the liaison for Burnett Elementary School. And it took me over there, and on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I think it wasn't it, Selena? I think something like that. But 3 days a week, 3 mornings a week, I would help second and third graders out, and I did that for 10 years. I guess I didn't have enough to do, so I went down the middle and Need to Read and thought I'd help some people pass GEDs. I was pretty good in math, so I could help them do that. And so I did that for 6 years. And I also helped some people learn English. And primary thing with their English is that we use so many slang words they don't understand the language. But I spent a lot of time doing that. And then I was a big brother. I've had 3 little brothers. The last one was a little black boy, and he was 7th or 8th grader, I guess, when I first got him. And he lived with his grandmother, and his father lived in Austin. His mother lived in a wheelchair and was not right mentally, and lived, she's in a nursing home. And one day he says, Bob, he says, you don't mind if I don't call you my little big brother, do you? I don't know. What do you want to call me? And I was really expecting something going to be good on this. But he said, how about Grandpa? I got, again, with Lori Miller, who's now the go-between to the school here in church, and she got me back with Selena, and again, over to, so I'm now helping out first graders read. I got 3 of them that I have 1 day a week. You want to put the last slide on, please? This is F-86s, and this some pictures you probably never see airplanes this close. You've seen formation flying. I'm in this first airplane that you can see there. The guy that's leading the flight that took the picture, he is a retired Air Force 2-star general. And then me, and then the third one, I don't know what, his name is Riley Westmoreland. And the last one, name was Lou Shattuck, and he got shot down twice over in Vietnam and spent 5.5 years of the Vietnamese. I saw him one time after that at an air show over in Atlanta. But just thought you'd like to see that picture because you don't get a chance to see ones like that. I'm just all but done, Kara. So a prayer that I saw in the, I don't know where I even saw it, but it fits me to a T. And it says, God has protected me more times than I can count. So I can only imagine the times that I've been rescued that I didn't know about. Thank you, God, for always being there. And even when I did not know it, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I got my tear ducts are a little too close to me sometimes. Anybody have any questions about flying or anything I said to show you? Yes, sir.
Not about flying, but
Sir?
what caused you to start going to church?
I'm sorry, I can't.
What caused you to start going to church?
That was it. I was going to tell Janice Chapman over here lived next door to us, or 2 houses away, and she was going to the church here, so we decided to join. That was 1977, and we've been a member ever since. You don't see many wreckage fields like that where people crawl away or walk away, but so God definitely had me in his hands that night. Yes, sir. Yes.
I want to know if you hurt. Do you still hurt?
No, I really don't. I have to be careful with my back, but I really don't have any. Knock on wood. I really don't have any. Just be careful what I lift and how I use my back. That's the only thing that really. I had a hard time driving afterwards, although I could see fine, but driving at night, cars that were a mile down the road felt like they were right there and they had lights on full bright. But I eventually got over that, so I didn't worry about it. But that was the only thing that really. Betty, when she first saw me, when my head went right in the instrument panel, when I had the helmet, it caved it all in, and my head was kind of like egg-shaped, but it's off to the side, something like that. It hurt, but about 2 weeks later, 3 weeks, I didn't have any white skin on me. I was black, blue, yellow, red, green, whatever you can name I had, but it all went away eventually. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to mention my father was a pilot World War I. My brother-in-law was B-24 Liberator
Pilot?
World War II. But I graduated from Baylor University in 1950, and I thought, I want to fly a little bit. So you'll be almost unbelievable when I tell you what it costs to fly a Piper Cub. With the instructor, it was $6 an hour.
Oh,
With the airplane flying solo, it was $8 an hour with the instructor, plane instructor, flying solo, $6 an hour. It was so expensive I didn't fly past about 25 hours.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
sorry.
Go ahead, Dale.
Well, I know now why you were friends with George Gobel.
I'm sorry. I don't have my hearing aids on.
You were friends with George Gobel.
Yeah, very much, yes.
Who was my neighbor, and he flew in World War II.
Well,
And he got our two girls through school because he told them about the whole war, and I think they were the only two that knew about it when they
yeah,
went to school.
yeah. I've worked with George a little bit when I flew with El Paso Products, and George, when they jerked him out of high school when the war was going on to start off with, and he was on the 88 crews that shot at the B-17s, and he said the optics were so good he could see the bombardier in each individual airplane up there. So that was pretty awesome. And
When he said when the war was over, he was barefooted.
mhm,
It's hard for me to tell.
yeah,
And he was walking home in Germany, and he said that the black American was the best soldier that there was.
they had over there.
And they always stopped and picked them up.
Uh,
And one took him home.
yeah, that's good.
And anyway, it was very interesting.
Yeah, I'm sorry I took so long, Kara.
No, you did great. And I thought, Bob, your prayer that you ended with, I thought was just so perfect, so appropriate. Of you have more times than most of being able to see God's hand on your life, God's hand sparing and preserving you for more to do, and yet there's probably countless more that you don't even know about.
yeah.
And so, I think I could speak for everyone in this too of what a privilege it was to have heard you share tonight, and I thank you again for being willing to do that. And Bob will stay here if there are others that want to come up and ask some other questions that maybe you didn't want to do in front of everyone else. So thank you for being here tonight, and thank you again.
Thank you, appreciate it. Again, I apologize for getting very emotional, but it's, I met some wonderful people, and I meet good people right here in church too. You meet them all the time, and it's just, I still keep in contact with a guy that I went through cadets with, but way back when. Gosh, oh my God, that seemed like a long time ago. But the close calls, I got a couple more close calls, but you don't want to hear about those. They've already heard enough of those things.